don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Never tell me the odds.
The greatest idea in human history, the theory of evolution by natural selection.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
As a date with destiny. In order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive.
We're living in captivity, and it's time to break free.
Welcome to A Wilder Life with Eric Edmeades.
Welcome back to A Wilder Life, the podcast where we explore what it really means to live freely, fully, and in alignment with our evolutionary roots. I'm your host, Eric Edmeades, and today we have a guest who embodies the intersection of science, well-being, and personal transformation. Brett Harmeling is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, biohacker, and the founder of A Happy Life Labs, a company dedicated to optimizing human potential through technology and well-being. He's a yogi, a mindset coach, and a man on a mission to redefine what it means to be truly happy and fulfilled. Brett's work spans from the boardroom to the yoga mat, from high-tech biohacking to deep philanthropic efforts. He's received the President's Lifetime Achievement Award for his dedication to service, and he's constantly experimenting with ways to push the boundaries of human performance and personal freedom. I got to tell you, Brett, I'm super excited to have this conversation. Thanks so much for being here on the show with me.
Yeah, Eric, thank you for having me. Excited to be here and looking forward to going deep together.
Sounds good. I'm going to start right off with the very first thing that I got from your team is, Brett grew up on a Dutch farm. So we got to let's get clear. Does that mean everybody pays for themselves? I'm kidding. What?
No, it just means that I'm deeply rooted in my heritage. My last name is really important, and I take a lot of pride in how I was raised. And so with everything that I'm doing in the world, I always kind of go back to my roots, and I give it credit to having a lot of structure when I was a kid, because I am a very passionately excited person who likes to explore a lot of different things, also known as a polymath. So I dive into very complex subject matters to take that information and solve very specific global problems. And so anyway, going back to my roots, it's really important to acknowledge where I came from, because I know that people that may be listening to this may be like, man, how am I supposed to get out of the Midwest or wherever you may feel stuck in your life? I'm just here to tell you that it's possible.
I love it. I mean, I can relate on a lot of levels. I grew up in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which has its own level of obscurity. And I remember my mom on her 40th birthday getting a mug, and it said 40 and still in the Maritimes, and, kind of a sentence in a sense. So apparently we can break out of wherever we were and go out and do some great things in the world. I also really like the reference back to roots. I had a conversation with a friend of mine a long time ago about what it was like to have a link to ancestry. I have on both of my mother's and father's side, they really made an effort when we were kids to understand where we'd come from. I also come in a sense from Dutch roots, because Dutch to South Africa to, and there's a lot of legacy there. And it's interesting because not only does that speak to the opportunity I think that we can share with people, but also it gives me a sense of responsibility. If you came from great people, then you gotta continue being great people, I suppose. So
I feel that pressure. It's a good pressure.
It's a good pressure. It's a good pressure. I love it. So let's jump in. I'm curious. I mean, I'm not really one for, I don't know how to put it. I get awards from time to time, and I don't want to. I appreciate it and I like it. Some mean a lot more than others, but I'm thinking a presidential award for lifetime achievement. That's got to be a pretty big one.
Yeah, I kind of came out of left field, and it felt good because a lot of the work that I did in saving kids from sex trafficking over the years to me, it meant that my work was recognized. And so that speaks a testament and volumes to kind of to my world behind the scenes. As I am on social media, I also live a very private life. You won't see pictures of my kids online. You also probably won't know where I am or traveling unless, you're inner circle, which is good. It's a healthy boundary that I've set up. People use, social media as a tool, and some people abuse it as a tool. And so if you don't manage your technology, it'll manage you, is what I tell people. And so that felt really good to be recognized at the highest level in the country. So
that is really cool. Similar but different. I was summoned to Ottawa some years ago to get a medal from the Canadian Senate, and it was very humbling. But I imagine that you had this experience too, and I'll ask you to comment on it. But it was far less important to me was the accolade it was the, oh crap, now they really expect some things from me. It wasn't like it was a reward for what was done. It was like a statement of we're expecting more. Did you have some of that?
Not as much, because I consciously chose to navigate away from like doing active missions in that space, to build the family and create a life of freedom and fulfillment. And so I like still use my tools, relationships, and resources to solve those complex problems. And so I serve on global advisory boards that are actively doing anti-human trafficking efforts and humanitarian disaster response things. And so I'm just very passionate about the work, and there's nothing that'll stop me. But I've taken a kind of a backseat. I'm like, like out of the 1,000+ kids that I've helped save, like a reminder, it's like every kid, like one is enough to get this award. And so I'm just forever grateful and blessed to even had the opportunity to do that kind of work.
It is highly important work. In fact, the senator that nominated me for the medal that I got, I learned a lot about the Canadian political system from her, and I actually came to admire her and the Senate a great deal. In our Senate's a little different than yours. We don't vote for them; they're nominated, and once they're nominated for life, which means they can let the politics go. And so, she was nominated by the Liberal government, the equivalent of the Democrat government in the U.S. But then eventually she declared and became an independent. But what she really did was used the position there to exactly do what you were doing. She was working to help free girls from sex slavery in some of the countries where that happens a lot. She really was dedicated to that right up until she retired. So that's a hell of an important pursuit. Let's talk a little bit about solving other large global problems, as you talked about, that you like to dive into something, learn enough about it to potentially generate some cool solutions. I also am inclined that way. The purpose even of this podcast is to examine what we call evolutionary mismatch theory, and that is like, where is our pain and our suffering stemming from, and then trying to derive solutions from that. So maybe you can. What kind of inspired you to want to do that, and what are some of the examples that you've experienced?
Yeah, in the health and wellness space, which has been a passion of mine, I just took matter into my own hands, and I did some deep inner work, some shadow work, some hero's journey type work, and I realized quite quickly that the issues are in the tissues. And so if our bodies are, we're light beings, and we hold on to memory, and we really take on more information, we absorb things like everything. And so it's really important to be cognizant about your environments and like where you're putting yourself, and also having you're being able to put your shield up when you need to, if you're in a space of like where you don't have a choice to where you have to be. And so I'm sure I had several traumatic brain injuries, but I had like one specific one that kind of took me out pretty good. And I just took matter into my own hands to help to start healing that brain injury over time. And so my first modalities include like functional grade mushrooms and trying different nootropics and different adaptogenic herbs to accelerate neurogenesis. And then I added in a red light, and then I went to my neurologist and had my scan done. I was doing annual scans just to see the progress, to make sure I was trending in the right direction, which is important. Always test, don't guess. Like you might feel, I would say, trust what you feel, not what you hear, right? But you have to test when it comes to this kind of thing. And so I had good information. Anyway, this light had helped me actually regrow between the mushrooms and the light. It helped me regrow the neurons that were that were limiting my brain from functioning the way it could optimally, to now, like, that's why I call myself a superhuman, because I like made a full recovery, and I'm actually like operating in its fullest potential, which doesn't mean that I don't wake up tired or have bad days, by the way. It just means that I've really optimized my brain from where it was to being able to do a lot of things and be a dynamic professional. And I think one of the greatest skill sets that I have too are grit and adaptability.
Yeah, grit really matters. And for me, grit often stems from my passion for the outcome. It's like the more emotionally engaged I am in the outcome, the more grit I have on the path to that outcome. And I'm with you on that. When I noticed in your social media stuff, speaking about biohacking, I see you connecting with a number of the different biohackers out there. I really like what you said about you really need to test. You can't just do this theoretically. And frankly, it strikes me that a lot of the, say, supplementation, longevity sciences, and biohacking is really like that these days. It's like some influencer gets on Instagram or TikTok or something and says this herb does that, and all of a sudden everybody thinks they need to take that. I'm curious. I mean, how did you find your way into that space, and what's your discipline about that now?
Yeah. So the reason I actually built Happy Life Labs, which has been taken many renditions as a company. And so we're now in that next phase of growth. Basically, you go to all these conferences and sometimes you're buying candy, sometimes you're buying a red light, sometimes there's so much information and so many products and tools out there. And so I'm like, you know what? I can't find a place that just only has only the best products, like vetted, certified, guaranteed, quality made, good warranty to back it up in case something goes wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And then beyond the products, I'm really focused on the people behind the products, because if you were going to create something, Eric, for instance, and you just did it to make money, like, do you think that product would really have its full capabilities in terms of healing people? Probably not. If you did it with only in the intention of healing people, no money, like all money off the table, chances are that product would
Not going
become
to reach very many people.
yeah, it would be an incredible product, but not a lot of people can use it. So I'm kind of the bridge that brings traditional medicine and functional holistic medicine together. And so I start introducing these tools and technologies into major corporations and hospital systems and clinics that have heard about this stuff, but they're like, oh, well, what about this? And like a simple example would be like LED red light technology. I will argue that LED red light technology is an overpowered hype that will excite your cells and do the job, but over time will actually damage your cells because your body cannot actually process that level of intensity. We're never designed, and humans adapt, so you're not in trouble, or it's not bad. Don't go throw your red light away, but over time it'll actually cause cellular degeneration because your cells are stressed, because it's that, like, if there's a microflictor involved that you can't see to the human eye, and you might be able to just see it with a smartphone in a certain, feet per seconds, whatever, like footage setting that will show you that flicker. But if you're using a natural red light, then that light can actually penetrate deep into your tissues and actually you can get the healing and the frequency that your body needs to do what it's designed to do. So that's just a simple example, right? And so there's all these caveats, like someone will sell magnesium, but I'm like, what kind? And then you ask that question, people are like, oh, I didn't know there's many kinds. I'm like, well, the body has there's 7 kinds that the body needs. And so it's
I find that fascinating. People go, oh, I should be taking magnesium, and they don't recognize, citrate, glycinate, and what have you. And the joke of it is that only in English does that make sense. Like, that's like saying I need to take hydrogen and therefore I drink water because it's hydrogen dioxide. Like magnesium glycinate is a different thing from the other. And of course, we're in the fad generation where it's like, as soon as you hear something, you got to run with it. I observed something interesting the other day, just thinking about this. I was doing some writing, and it was a matter of looking at the 100-meter dash and the world record for the 100-meter dash, or the 100-yard dash, I suppose in your case, but you understand. In 100 years, with all the tremendous advancements in technology, running shoe, running surfaces, nutrition sciences, psychology sciences, VO2 max measurements, like all of the incredible stuff that's come along. Do you have any idea how much we've improved the 100-meter dash?
Maybe like a couple milliseconds.
Yeah, it's tiny, like a tiny percentage per year, basically less than a second over 100 years. Yeah. And I think to some degree, I think we have to think about that relative to things like biohacking. Like, one of the things that we think a lot about is, and really to your point, when we created our company WildFit, we've now had 150,000 people in 100 countries go through our programs, and we've never launched a supplement brand. And all of our business advisors are like, do you have any idea how much money you're leaving on the table? And I'm like, yeah, I do. But I also know that most people take supplements out of fear and not out of knowledge. And, so how do you, when you're having that conversation, how do you help somebody choose the appropriate path rather than taking a shortcut?
Well, it starts with bioindividuality, which is a fancy term for your biology is different than everyone else's. And so we start by testing. So my wife is involved in the business too. Her company is Saverly. They do all the testing. And so we start with the foundation. Like, why would you start with vitamins if you are minerally deficient and your body can't even absorb the vitamins, for perspective? So we administer a different series of tests. The most popular would be the HTMA, which stands for hair tissue mineral analysis. And so she does that test, and because she's, over a decade of clinical experience in the space. She's able to take that information and then provide amazing, direct, simple feedback on what to do to like build the foundation of your health. From the foundation, then we start adding on different things based on the environmental stressors that you have to go through. Like if you're going to be a big runner, like there's certain things you have to do. If you're going to be a yogi and doing hot yoga, there's different things for everyone. And a lot of it has to do with what you put yourself through. And so no recommendation should be taken as a general recommendation. I'm proud of you for not having, for doing that. Now, I will say like it's been hard to navigate this space because it's really not hard in today's socioeconomic economy to just go start a supplement line because it's like all these white label products. So it all comes down to sourcing, right? So it's like, and the biggest one that people like, oh wow, was when like Vital Proteins like had amazing amounts of like lead in their collagen. People are like, what? Like a health company was overlooked? Yeah, because they built the product, collagen, cool, but then like they overlook the sourcing. And so we never do that at Happy Life Labs. Like that's why companies send us our product to test for at least 30 to 90 days. We run it through our analysis based on everything. We get as much information as we can before we allow someone to be in our portfolio, because if we're working with the top professionals and athletes in the world, helping them win world championships and amazing things like that, then like we can't be average, and no human is average. No one is. Everyone deserves this kind of thing. And we just focus on helping the top of the top, because I believe that when people get to a different level of the game, then a lot of times they take a back seat to their health takes a back seat. And I'm like, it's the opposite. If you look at the people at the top of the game, they put their health first and they built the world around them second.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's and of course a big part of the problem we have right now is you can kind of have this chicken and egg conversation. Is it the company that made the bad product, or is it the fact that consumers just aren't discerning enough and they just want a quick fix and they just want a shortcut? I went for a stem cell treatment, and I was talking with the clinics, the clinicians and the doctors that were involved. And one of the things that they comment on is people often come in and say with a shoulder injury or a knee injury, and they'll say to them, well, you can come in for this treatment, but if you're eating Big Macs and Coca-Cola, the stem cell treatment isn't going to work as effectively. And and yet there's still these people will come in and spend the money, and they'll go for the biohack or the longevity hack or the shortcut, but they don't put that foundational work in. And I guess my question is, if you're faced with a client who's, say, presenting whatever challenge it is, and that there's let's call it a biohack solution or a supplemental solution, but you also know there's a foundation of lifestyle change underneath it that needs to take place in order for the solution to be effective and in order for the solution to last.
Yeah.
How do you encourage the client to go that path, to do the to do the right thing?
Yeah, energy creates energy, right? And so we only attract people that are willing to tell the truth. Okay. So like everyone knows they're not going to come to me. Nobody will come to me if they like for general advice or to like play it small or soft. Like I'm bold and direct with what I recommend, because I've helped people, including myself, make massive transformations in optimizing their own health. Okay. And so yes, habits is like arguably just as important as supplements. Just like, people like are all into this medicine journeys and ayahuasca these days and this kind of thing. Nothing against it. But my first thing is, have you ever tried a proper, legitimate breathwork session?
Yeah.
Because some of the most profound experiences that I've had in my life have just been around breathwork. And as a master certified 500-hour yoga instructor, like I always taught, like, the poses, don't let the poses get in the way of the breath work. The most important thing is the breath work. And if you don't think the class was challenging enough, I can almost guarantee you weren't breathing in a really conscious way. So
yeah, and if you're overstretching so that you need to hold your breath, then you've gone too far. And I'm with you. That makes sense.
And so we have simple exercises like the first one. It comes down to food. Like, what are you putting into your body? So it's, what are you breathing? Because if you don't filter your air. Like, we live in Houston. If you live in Houston, you should have an air filter. I can literally see the petrochemical plants 30 miles right over there. And so you either filter the air through your lungs or you have something help you, and then that takes a lot of burden off your own
Yeah, you
lungs.
either are the filter or you have filtered air.
Yes. Oops. Speaking of which, just drop my water, and then it's all good. And then water. Speaking of which, it would be number two. Air and water seem like it's a simple thing, but it's so overlooked, so overlooked. And so we start there, and then a simple exercise that I can just share with it's like go in your fridge, and then look for anything with this. We have a list of certain like oils that we really highly recommend against, and added sugars and artificial things. Just like go in your fridge with no attachment and just start looking at labels and just start throwing away anything that's robbing you from your vitality. I know you're gonna fight yourself like, oh, but it's so good. It's literally your temple. And so you want to be feeding yourself things that are in alignment with living a thriving, vibrant lifestyle. And if you're not, I'm not saying that I don't eat queso and fajitas and like enjoy like amazing foods from all over the world like this occasionally. I'm saying it's that 80% consistency that's going to really move the needle in terms of health span and longevity. And I say those are very two different things, health span and longevity, because a lot of people are focused on like, I want to live longer. I'm like, you don't want to live longer if you're not healthy. So we want to focus on health span first. That'll take care of longevity. Longevity is a result of actually doing the right thing. And so when the
Actually,
work that I
yeah, my view of that is health span defined, in my world is living as long as you living as long as you enjoyably can.
yes.
And that is the only kind of longevity worth having, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. And so it's and for someone like myself that's like a futurist and talking to people about, oh, like, in the future, it's really important to kind of bring it back to home and remind myself like present moment is the only thing that matters. And it's shifting out of that sympathetic to parasympathetic and like just being mindful. I recommend anybody here to look at the Hawkins scale of frequencies. It's everywhere in my spaces because it's a reminder like in every moment you can shift energetically where you're at in space, and whatever energy you show up with will be the energy that you attract. And so just be mindful of how you show up and where you are, because that energy speaks a lot of times louder than words.
All
And
right.
and the cycle and the psychological thing behind that, Eric, is that our bodies are innately intelligent, which means like we literally cannot lie to ourselves. Like you can, and anytime you ever have, whether it's a relationship, a food, that last drink, whatever the thing is, chances are things didn't go well because you were innately intelligent to know that that was not good for your health. And so
Yeah,
listen.
I think that the question of whether we lie to ourselves, I mean, clearly people do, but I think it's more of an incremental thing. It's like, as you said, if you want to have queso, if you want to have a cheese and you don't think it's an ideal food, the issue is not whether or not you eat cheese. The issue is how often you do that. The issue is
Yeah,
the quality of it that you get and
the
those
quality.
types of things. And I think that the major lie that I see from people is I don't do this all that often, when really it's their normal life. Like, oh no, I'm making an exception today, but you check in with them, they're making that same exception tomorrow and the next day, and then it's the cumulative impact of this low grade deception. I think is really important. How do you? Let's imagine you've got you've got somebody that average person, average life, average business, what have you, and you're now wanting to introduce them to a happier, healthier life. You want to introduce them to the possibilities around having a better health span. I mean, before you get to that answer, when we bear in mind 1 in 3 people are going to go to cancer, 1 in 3 to heart disease, and the fourth biggest killer is medical intervention. So when you're bringing somebody on and you want to kind of start them on the path, what's your strategy there? How do you encourage them, and where do you get them to start?
Yeah, this comes directly from Tony Robbins, but the quality of your life is based on the quality of the emotions that you experience most consistently. So people think, and that's why I literally named my company Happy Life Labs. I could have named it anything, but I'm like, nothing matters if you're not living a life that has fulfillment, joy, happiness. And you should look at your life like a laboratory experiment, right? Like, okay, what do I have going on that's robbing me from my health? What do I have that's filling me up? Including habits and relationships and communities. Because if you want to, like, let's say, get that Ferrari or whatever the thing is you want to go obtain in your life, it's really not the thing that's gonna like bring you the happiness. It's like, who you become in the process that's going to really move the needle in terms of happiness and fulfillment. Like they say, like the definition of failure is a person that's won but that doesn't have fulfillment, you know?
Yeah, yeah. When I saw the name of your company, it sort of took me back. The very first time I got, say, quoted, you know, like I wrote something and it got picked up and went around the internet. It was like in 1995 or 1996. I was publishing a magazine and I wrote, there was some writing I did there, and I wrote, the only true, somebody asked me about like, how do you define success? And I said, the only real definition of success really is the number of days that you spend happy. You know,
Yeah.
the rest of it's all, the rest of it's all fluff. And that way of thinking probably also was inspired to some degree by Tony Robbins. He had a big impact on me as a kid. And then more recently, I guess about 10 years ago, I spent a year touring with him and teaching at his business mastery programs. And it was really fascinating to see what it was like when you've attracted so many people who definitely want more. And again, to have that same, whether you're talking about money or relationships or physical body, it's how to get people to do a little bit of the hard work, you know, instead of simply going for the shortcut. You know, as Tony would say, he doesn't like it when people call him a motivational speaker, because the fact is, if you need motivation to do something, you didn't want to do it. What you really want is internal drive and inspiration, which you clearly have had. What woke you up to saying, hey, I want to give this to people?
I feel almost guilty at the level of like happiness and opportunities that I've been able to, and experiences that I've been able to enjoy. And so I just say, like, the only reason that those things were possible was because of the relationships, because of the risks that I took, because of me putting myself out there and being bold and passionately just interested in getting to know people for who they were. Like, I'm not the person that's like, what do you do? I don't, that's not the driver for me. A more common question that I'll ask people is like, what motivates you? Like, what gets you excited? What is the thing? What's the thing that wakes you up, like, that you can't stop thinking about? You know? And then I also love talking about, you know, in growth and business, like, and health, because I think like the world is becoming more and more connected. Like, I used to be like a unicorn talking about yoga and doing all this stuff back in 2012, and now it's like everyone's talking about it. And so being ahead of the curve, I know that because I study patterns and how the world's best leaders and people think, act, and create. And so, you know, happiness is really an interplay of biology, psychology, and then also different social factors, like where and who you choose to spend time with. And so I was like very motivated to if you follow me on social media, for instance, you won't see a sale really. You probably won't understand what I do. It's a lot of pictures with a lot of amazing people, because that is the thing that I love the most, is literally genuinely connecting with other humans that are making indelible impacts in humanity, doing what they do best. And the reason that I attract those people in my life is because I'm always on this constant um, mission to become the best version of myself. And so there's all these levels, and just like I've heard it said, if you don't feel like an imposter, you're not trying hard enough, right? It's because your old self wants to pull you back and say, no, no, don't explore that level of success or whatever that, you know, word is for you. And I'm like, oh,
I'll offer you a slightly different take on the imposter syndrome thing. And yeah, I do get that some people do feel constrained that way, but I actually think that imposter syndrome feeling is not designed so much to hold you back. It's designed to propel you forward. There's only two ways to break out of imposter syndrome. The one is to not take on the challenge, which is what you're describing. And the other way is to become good enough to deliver on the promise so that you don't feel like an imposter. So what really scares me is people who don't feel imposter syndrome. That frightens me. Those are the charlatans and the scumbags. Like they just go out into the world making big promises that they can never deliver upon. I like when I wake up in the morning and go, can I really do this?
Yeah, yes. Yes, I'm with you on that. So, and then yeah, the whole concept, also a Tony thing, life is happening for me, not to me. I've had some incredibly hard life challenges that have been thrown at me, and so it would be really easy for me to just pick up a bottle and, you know, disappear and just not do what I'm doing. It would be so much easier just to go get a job. I'm like very qualified to work a job, and so that would be the easy thing. But I just, in prayer and being Catholic, I just deeply connected to God, and just trusting his lead and his guidance, because I just don't know any other way. And the where I feel the most supercharged is when I am doing my gratitude practice and journaling, where I am spending a lot of time outside, where I am praying, where I am making sure I'm kind of hitting those simple milestones. I just
Yeah.
feel really fulfilled when all those things are happening.
Speaking of fulfillment, I've had the great privilege over the last 15 years of spending a lot of time with hunter-gatherer tribes in East Africa. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Hadza or Hadzabe people. They've been medium popularized because a couple of people have been on Joe Rogan talking about it and such. But they are proper hunter-gatherers. They don't have money. They don't have homes. They have to hunt and gather their food every single day. And it's a hard life. I've done embedded stays with them where I've like stayed with them for weeks at a time, where I don't take food with me. I only take water because, I'm not willing to take that chance. But, one day I was having a conversation with one of our guides, and he's not a member of the Hadzabe tribe. He's a member of the Datoga tribe. Now, they are pastoralists. They keep livestock, and they have homes and money and cell phones and stuff. So they live a completely different life from the Hadzabe people. And I said to him, I asked him who was happier, he or the Datoga people or the Hadza people, and he said he felt that his people were happier. And I said, why? And he said, well, because we have livestock and we can sell it, and then we have money. And I go, yeah, but then what do you do with the money? And he goes, well, we can buy more livestock and alcohol. And I said, okay, maybe I didn't ask the question properly. What I'm really asking is, who do you think wakes up every day feeling a greater sense of connection and contentedness with the universe? And he goes, oh, well, if you ask it that way, it's definitely the Hadzabe people. And I will tell you, from my experience, over 15 years of visits with them, they are the most happy, most consistently contented human beings I've ever seen in my life. And yet they have to run 10 to 20 miles every single day to get their food requirements met. They sleep under the stars. They don't have mattresses. They don't have hot and cold running water and porcelain. But I'm telling you, in that environment, they're a match. And I think you said it earlier, your energy is so affected by your environment. And one of the things that I've really observed with them is that that environment is the environment, it's nature. And we've so removed ourselves, and we now live with walls around us. We block the sun from our skin. We eat packaged food. We have escalators that go up to the gym, and it seems like that, I guess partly roundabout where I'm going with this is, how much of this, and you've mentioned a little bit earlier, but how much of this quality of life adventure do you think is about separating ourselves from technology and modernness and just immersing ourselves in some nature every now and again?
Well, I mean, nature is unequivocally holds codes that allow for us to feel human. And so I consistently recommend people go on what I call digital detoxes, because speaking of health and wellness, our phone is also considered like a bioweapon by the nature of what the frequencies that it puts off. And so when we're around all these technologies and we're exposed to, once again, unnatural forces that are invisible, they do things to our cells that are unexplainable. And so there's a lot of autoimmune stuff. There's a lot of people that are not well in the world, right? And that are really on this journey because they're trying to figure it out. Like, what's wrong with me? When we get back to nature, nature gives us all of the fundamental tools that we need to feel human again. Because one that's really talked about is the Schumann resonance, the Earth's heartbeat. It's the frequency at which it has this beat. And the more disconnected we get from that, the more we see ourselves getting sick, aging, inflammation, etc. Like quite immediately. Like when you touch Earth with your bare feet, for instance, like you immediately ionize, like within a second. Like the transfer of energy is immediately. And so by no mistake does God have, I think it's like over 1 million times per hour that the lightning strikes Earth. Like, what do you think is happening? Like the Earth is getting charged from the clouds. And so we're electromagnetic beings. Like we charge from the sun's frequency and we stay charged by the Earth's magnetism.
You said something earlier about, there are codes in nature. There's code that activates something within us. And I think that is a big part of it to me, is that, for my book, The Evolution Gap, one of the things I explored was what happens when you take animals out of nature and you stick them in captivity. And the truth is, with the exception of goldfish, terrible things happen.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of kidding about goldfish because I don't think it's so good for them either. But, speaking of fish, if you take a great white shark and put it in the aquarium, it might last weeks.
Yeah.
And, and in fact, in Monterey, they put one in and they realized it wasn't going to make it. They released it back out to the ocean. It still died.
Yeah.
And, that's
Trauma.
what captivity does. And I think that to a large degree, it's very much like we're living in captivity. So when you talk about those codes, it's like, here's an example. I quite like this one is if you walk into a spa or a Thai restaurant and there's like bird song up in the sound system, for some reason, we find that really relaxing. I can tell you from having spent a huge amount of time in the bush in Africa with lions and shit, when the birds stop, it means there's danger.
Mm-hmm.
That when they stop, it means there's danger. When the birds are chirping, it means that it's safe. And when you talk about there being a code, I mean, there is a code right there. Your
Yes.
DNA, your instincts, hear the birds chirping and go, okay, there's no predators around. Or my family is being affectionate with me. And my DNA goes, oh, they wouldn't be doing that if we were under threat at the moment. They'd be sitting still. And so I think the way you said that, it's really, there are codes that in nature, and now we live in our concrete buildings, and it's like we got to figure out a way to bring some of those codes in.
That's right.
So let me go from there because on the one side, I think we could talk a lot about, hey, the nature deprivation syndrome and how you can use biohacking to close that gap. But you're also a pretty heavy technologist. Didn't I see you talking about privatizing flight for people?
Yep. Yeah. One of the projects that I'm involved in right now is building the future of aviation, really. And so we're establishing a new airline that's private travel, so hyper regional, meaning like 3-hour flights or less. We're taking the world's safest, most efficient plane and basically building a grid all across America. And we'll also go to, Europe and Canada, et cetera. But really what we're doing is democratizing access to private aviation. And so just think like Southwest Airlines business model with Uber, right? And so if you put those two together, we have the company we're building now. And so,
okay, I have a question for you about that. Just my own musings, a little unrelated, but when I try to evaluate the pace of change that we're living through right now, AI and the variety of technologies that are changing things. I was in an Uber in London many years ago, and the London black cabs at that point were protesting Uber pretty badly and sometimes violently. And the Uber driver was kind of complaining about that. And I said to him, well, you got to see it from their perspective, and it'll be the same for you in a few years. And he goes, what do you mean? And I go, well, when they release self-driving cars, you don't think you're going to be protesting? And he goes, what do you mean self-driving cars? And I go, and this is 10 years ago. So I was ahead of course, everybody knows this now, but it wasn't common knowledge then. And he goes, what do you mean self-driving cars? And I said, self-driving cars, like that's the next iteration. And you're the most expensive part of this cab drive I'm on right now. It's not the car that's expensive. Once we get rid of you, this cab fare is going to be 60% cheaper.
Yep.
So the natural extension of that thought later I realized was that it seems to me that Uber and Lyft and Bolt and these companies that do those kind of rideshare type services, as they switch to self-drive and as Tesla activates their network to do this, why on earth would I get on a plane to go to LA from Vegas or vice versa? Why would I do that? And that's why I'm curious about your gap. You're going after that 3-hour thing. If I'm in LA and I need to get to Vegas, I'm already contemplating, should I drive or fly? Because by the time I go to the airport, wait through security, it's LAX, I don't want to do all that. And then I fly, and then I got to wait for my bags on the other side, and navigate. I could have just gotten in a car, and I'd have been there in almost the same time. The main reason is that it's cheaper. It's you can get to Vegas for $89 on Southwest or some silliness, and the car would be more. But the minute they remove the driver from that car, I'm going to be able to get there for $50. Mm-hmm. So how does that factor into, hey, we're going to launch an airline that does 3-hour flights? I'm curious.
3 would be the max. That was just for perspective. What we're doing is like short haul regional travel. So you wouldn't go to LAX. You go to a private airport that's very close to your house, walk right through the airport, get on the plane. So the average speed of travel on commercial is 75 miles per hour. Okay. The average speed on our airline is 300 miles per hour.
Because you're taking into account the time I spent in the lounge.
Yeah, the lounge, like you're driving to a major hub, you have to park the car, all these factors. And so people that fly private, the number one reason they do it is because of time, no doubt. And so once we have, 1,100 of these aircrafts all throughout America, you'll be able to simply just go on the app, book the flight, and It's really like right now, for instance, the economics of it, we've done over 12,000 flights. It's not like we're new or we're like trying to figure it out. We are currently in a bridge round that's going to be closing quite soon here, and then from there we'll scale up and just start adding more and more jets. What's exciting about this project is because of the nature of the business and the certificate we have, we're actually going to be adding other types of fleet, which is really exciting. Speaking of self-driving cars, we're going to be adding a type of fleet called an eVTOL. That stands for electrical vertical takeoff and landing. Those will be able to take you from from the parking lot of your business to your
Yeah.
home. They don't
Yeah,
need
I spend quite a lot of time in Dubai, and they're very, very nearly. I mean,
yes.
they're. Every time I go, I half expect to start seeing them in the sky already.
Yeah. So we're really close in America as well. The FAA is just getting their act together to make sure that the requirements are doing like exactly what they say. So it's one of those things that it's going to change the way that we move. And so it's a very disruptive thing because
Yeah.
just like you said, we're already cheap. Our cost to fly the plane is less than it costs to fly first class. So if you didn't have to go to a major hub and you could fly a private jet to Vegas and you could fly in a private, you would do it. And so
Yep.
same thing, if you didn't have to, if even in Houston, Austin, like, these smaller, it's like, man, it's just like kind of annoying. It's like I can almost drive there, but I should fly. It's like,
Yeah.
so the eVTOL solves for all that. And then where this world gets really kind of cool for me is that I'm going to be taking Happy Life Labs and integrating and synthesizing all of these partners into the airline so that the damaging effects of putting your body to altitude and being around, all the EMFs are mitigated completely. So you're going to arrive thriving instead of like, oh God, I need to like go find the nearest sauna or whatever it is.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that. I mean, obviously, in some airports these days, you see your like spa where you can go and de-stress a little bit. But it really struck me that that would be an ideal place for there to be, some sort of biohacking lab where you can go in and not simply de-stress, but IVs, for example, the hydration issue with flying, and there's a variety of things like that that could be done. So I imagine that could be quite exciting.
Yeah, it's the number one part of my wellness business is helping people travel.
That's super cool. Well, as
So
somebody who travels a great deal,
yeah.
I wish you the best of luck with that. The let me ask a real practical question then, and it's something I face quite a lot, and I think most people that regard themselves as fairly creative do is you clearly have a number of different passions and a number of different things. How do you maintain the appropriate level of focus on any given mission or project to get it where it needs to go? How do you make that happen?
The practical answer is time blocking and an administrative assistant. It's so critical for me to have my live off of my calendar.
Yeah.
And that also allows me to stay out of my business as much as I can. Like, right. I help people realize like when the business relies on them, it's not really technically that big. Like you can only build it as big as you can build yourself. And so you reach limitations pretty fast, right? Because we all have certain bandwidths. And so building SOPs and certain systems and protocols so that your business can scale above and beyond who you are, like that's the key right there. And just, I never feel like I'm in a bind because that type of energy work that I do is involved in anything. I've never had an investor write me $1 million check when they've been in a bad mood.
Doesn't happen.
So if you're not working with people that are happy and they're like, you're not bringing that to the table, if I'm in a bad mood, there's just not a chance I'm going to attract the kind of opportunities into me. And what I really like to focus on when it comes to like the overlapping of industries and different opportunities as a serial entrepreneur and investor of like many different companies, I always focus on the people more than I do the product, the returns, the performa. Like we have a team that analyzes all that kind of stuff anyway, but like I stay in the human capital
Yeah.
segment because I'm like, man, if Eric messes this up, I know he'll make it right. Whether it's if he can't do it on this deal, he'll do it on the next. Because I just know the kind of person he is, and so character is like the no. When I teach deal flow to people that are new to the game, I'm like, always like know the person doing the deal. Way more important than the deal itself. I'm telling you right now, because something will go wrong. And if that person isn't a good steward of finance and integrity, you will lose your chances you lose your money. If they
Yeah.
are, chances are the risk is way lower. So
I
get in the game with
I
people.
I'm so with you. I learned this lesson in the most painful way. I was doing a tour of a film studio in Northern California. And, while I was doing the tour, it turned out they were raising money and they had some really great cutting edge 3D technology. They used to be part of Lucasfilm. So it was like hallowed ground. Star Wars was made over there, Empire over there, Pixar was invented in this building, THX was over here. And, and at one point, it looked like they weren't going to be able to raise the capital they wanted. And the owners came to me and made me a proposal. And I thought, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to buy this place. And I went and talked to one of my advisors, two of my advisors. And one of them said to me, it's too fast, don't do it. And the other one said, tell me more about the people. And I said, well, I just don't have time to do that level of background checking. I'm really struggling. And I do have a funny feeling about this one guy. And he goes, then don't do it. But of course, it was so sexy, and we were working on Avatar. We were doing amazing movies. So in I went, and I got to tell you, it was one of the most painful things I ever did in business, and that's because I valued the deal and my optimism about the deal over the vetting of the people. In an ironic twist, an old Star Wars quote is, "Never have I seen a more heathenish collection of scum." And I, it took me a long time to dig out of that. But the other lesson that I got, to your point, was that I bumped into a client of mine from my first job, and I bumped into him years later, and he introduced me to a buddy of his, and he goes, "Oh, this is Eric." And he starts telling the story that I barely remember. And it was that it took me years to get him to buy from me. I was a sales guy at this company. It took me years to get him to buy from me. And then after that, his first order went horribly wrong, like horribly wrong. The company I worked for the quality assurance was bad, but I fixed it. I stayed up night and day and fixed it. And as a consequence, he ended up becoming like a multi-million-dollar client, like huge client for us.
Yep.
And I had never really connected the dots, but as he explained, 10 years later, he's explaining to this guy, he goes, the reason that I became such a major client is because the first deal went bad. And that's what let me, see the quality of the person. So I am with you. The people, that really is key to it. I think I'm going to get a bumper sticker.
Yeah. Invest in people, not products.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, couple quick things. Current book recommendations. What's out there that's got you? What's the most recent book that you thought, man, people got to read this?
Yeah, I would say that the book that I recommend the most to get started, and it's actually not a health and wellness book, but it's called Who, Not How. And it talks about, like, once you reach the different levels of the game, it's not about like you can come up with any product or service you want to once you have money, time, talent, skills. But it's like, who do you want to see at your boardroom table? Who do you want to see? Who do you want to build that with? That's so much more important. And so that's a good one. And then, buy back your time is another good one. I always teach you, like, the most important thing you can do is, like, feel like you're crushing it and in business and life and cash flow and all those things, while also having time to, like, live your life, right? And so it's picking things. And people that are working in jobs that say, if your job is not an investor in your dreams, then quit. If it's an investment in your dreams, meaning it's giving you benefits, cash flow, resources that you need, then stay in the job. Like, do what makes you happy,
I love that. That's really good. And then if you are in the world of, let's say, biohacking technology, or, let's say improving health span, tell me, what's the first step? Somebody's on the street, they've listened to our podcast, they're curious about what you guys do. What would be your prescription? Where do they start?
Yep. Well, if they're on the street, you might notice, like, homeless people have perfect hair. I mean, it may not be clean, but they have perfect full heads of hair.
Stop washing
So
your
they're
hair.
already doing they're already doing the outside thing, is what I'm getting at. Like, they're getting the codes from nature. And unfortunately, the first thing that, like, the process is simple, and I try to do everything in threes because the human mind can easily do threes. And so it's cleanse, balance, and then build. And so we want to start by getting things out of the body, heavy metal toxins, poison, whatever drugs, whatever it is the person's dealing with in their life. And it could be things like you're drinking water and you don't even know, but you're, like, poisoning yourself with certain chemicals that the municipality you live in is putting into the water just to prevent you from dying from the bacteria, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so I always start, going back to earlier in the podcast, always start with water. I always start with nature. I believe the future of longevity is actually ancestral, like going back to our roots. We have too much technology. It's a distracting world out there. And so, but the water, the air quality, these are fundamental places to start. And for generalist advice, most everyone is deficient in magnesium and vitamin D. So If you're like, I don't want to
Hey, I gotta
get
tell you,
tested, but most people are.
I
And the
gotta tell
reason
you,
is because the
I
fruits of
am
life.
like I've been in the ancestral health space since before Lauren Cordain wrote the Paleo Diet. Like I've been in that
Wow.
long. My
Yep.
great grandfather found the oldest sapien skull in the history of Earth, and so I've been studying this stuff since the beginning. And so as a consequence, I eat very well and I exercise well and what have you. But recently, I did a full bank, hair, blood, blah blah blah, and everything was good. And this is like you got this guy telling you, you're 55 years old, you should be taking some testosterone, you should be doing this, you should not. My buddy, it's his lab that we went through. He said the testosterone. He goes, well, the classification you have, we call that heroic. And this is after somebody telling me I should be taking it. But vitamin D was low. And think about this. I live in the tropics, but I also get that the last several months, I've been traveling a lot. I've been under a fair amount of personal and business stress and not spending as much time outside. And the fact of the matter is, boom, there it was. We got to measure and figure these things out.
Test, don't guess. It's pretty simple.
Well, speaking of that, I'm gonna invite you or suggest to you that you go. There's only a beta version of it out right now, but if you go to gapfinder.com, I think you're gonna like that. And the new one you're gonna love. I imagine you bumped into the term evolutionary mismatch theory, but it's basically the evaluation of nature deprivation syndrome in a sense. And so we developed a super comprehensive evolutionary mismatch theory test that's combined with your kind of traditional wheel of life fulfillment test. So it's like 10 areas of life, 10 questions per area of life. And then it produces a customized report for you on where the gaps are. And I think you'd probably like that. You can check it out at gapfinder.com. And very soon, the more comprehensive one will be published. So you can make sure you get access to that. I think you'll like it because if you're saying the roots to this are, hey, ancestral wisdom, the whole point of that is to help people. I believe the solution is the combination of ancestral wisdom, and I'm sure we're right on the same page with this, but the combination of ancestral wisdom with modern science and done responsibly, we can have the most incredible lives.
Yeah. I mean, the simplest thing, whether you like him or not, that David Sinclair says that's bold, but I believe is that aging is a disease. And once we can figure out how to not age, then then we're good. Like if you can figure out how to stop the aging process of cells, if you can literally figure out how to do that, then we have not a lot to worry about as long as we're protecting. So a lot of the biohacking stuff now that I'm recommending to people is literally in the protection space, like how to create a bioshield to protect your aura, right? Like quantum infinity capsule that has, harmonized electromagnetic frequency in your space so that you don't, spike.
Yeah, I live in the Dominican Republic, and I'll tell you, there's a couple of reasons. One is that the beach that we live on, the ocean takes the sand away every year and then puts it back. It's the cleanest sand on earth.
Wow.
And the air, if you look at where we are on the north coast of the Dominican Republic, the air that we breathe comes from Africa. In other words, it's been blowing for weeks across the Atlantic Ocean. It has not crossed a landmass. There's nothing in that air. It's as clean as air can be on this. Okay, it's Earth. It's not going to be perfect, but it's as close to perfect as it gets. So I'm a bit of a purist about, we really want to make sure that, like you said, we want to activate the right code from nature, activate the right software inside us. Brett, genuine pleasure. Tell me, how do people find you? Where can we send them? What can we introduce them to for you?
Yep, I'm pretty active on social media. So Brett Harmeling on Instagram, and then same thing on LinkedIn, which LinkedIn is just, kind of like paints a pretty clear picture of the kind of enterprises that I'm professionally involved with, whether it's philanthropic or nonprofit. So,
well, I will make sure we put the information into the show notes, and I'm sure that I have a good feeling that you would have probably end up crossing paths in real life one of these days. It was a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Eric.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of A Wilder Life. Please leave a review and share it. A Wilder Life with Eric Edmeades.